The program that she'll be presenting tonight is Black Hair-itage. My name is Angela Ingram, and I am a staff assistant for the Chicago Public Library, but I'm also a member of the library's African American Heritage Committee. The national theme for Black History Month is the Black family, representation, identity, and diversity. The Chicago Public Library's African American Heritage Committee decided to discuss and celebrate Black hair and explore the theme of representation, identity, and diversity through the strands and history of Black hair. So at this point, I'll allow Dr. Ichile to take over, and I hope you all enjoy the program.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. I like the strands of history. I like that.
That was creative, right?
That was clever. All right, so I hope everyone can see my screen. I came up with this title. Hold on, let's go back. Black Hair-itage, hair shaming, hair positivity, from Tignon Laws to Tessica Brown, because obviously Black hair is a hot topic these days, for better or for worse. We want to talk about heritage, but I think it's really important for us to talk about heritage in the context of the challenges that we have in appreciating our heritage, right? So that's why that's the title, and we'll definitely unpack all of this in a second. Okay, so this is me again, Dr. Iyelli Ichile. This is us, this is now. And this is really important for me. So before I start talking about who I am and my own hair story and why this is important to me, I want to offer a libation. So in the best of African tradition, we call to presence with us. We call into our midst more directly all of the community, whether that is seen or unseen. We honor them. We honor them for the energy and the gifts they've given us. And so I just want to do that. And without being in person with everybody and having all the other things you need to pour libation to the beautiful ancestors, I just want to offer some sort of verbal honorific intention setting. All right, so we want to set our intentions, regardless of what your spiritual practice is. We want to invite all that is good in the world, all that is strong medicine, all that is healthy for us, all that brings us into balance and into community with those who have gone before and those who will come behind us. We want to call all of that together in this space. Let the words that are said by me and all of the people present, all of the thoughts, all the ideas, all the contributions, may they all be used to their highest purpose for the advancement of people of African descent, for the betterment of our communities. We set this intention in the name of all that is good, again, all that is for our higher purpose, all that is for our health. Ashe. So that said, as you may have guessed or surmised, I'm a deeply spiritual person, and that has everything to do with why hair matters to me. I am what I call a scholar stylist. I definitely do hair. I rarely look the same way twice if you see me in one of these public talks, because I like to tinker with my hair. I've been doing hair since I was probably in middle school, just messing around my hair, and I did the big chop when I was 14, which is way, way earlier than some people do. I cut off my perm because I've been getting perms since I was 6. And so I had to figure out how to do my natural hair. And then I went through high school doing hair, through college doing hair. I worked at a natural hair salon for a long time as I got my degrees. And I come from a family of stylists and just beautiful folks who like to make the world beautiful. So if my cousin Natasha's on here, she's based out of Chicago. She does hair. It's really important, and I think people think of hair as like a frivolous thing, and I hope to convince you otherwise by the end of my presentation. So as you may have also heard or noticed, I'm originally from Chicago. So I grew up in part in Chicago. to an African-American mom from the South Side, and also to a Nigerian father who lived on the North Side. And the Chicago Public Library is really, really important for me because the Chicago Public Library basically raised me. We would spend many, many hours in the Chicago Public Library reading all the books, because whenever we wanted to know something about any topic, our mom was like, okay, let's get some books about it, and make us read 10 books. So by the time we moved away from Chicago, we were friends with everybody at multiple branches. So it's really like a full circle moment for me to be here with you. And this also contributed to me becoming the scholar that I am today. The love of reading, of studying, and of learning. And through my scholarship, I have learned that Black hair is deep. Black hair is not just culturally, aesthetically pleasing. It is not just about an individual person's style. It is not just about what is cute. It is about deep spiritual meaning. It is about political expressiveness. It is about resistance. So that's what I want to talk with you about today. Okay, so first things first, we have to establish that when I say Black hair, I mean African hair. And African hair has lots of different textures that it comes in, but African hair is Black hair. It's the same thing. I will use those terms interchangeably. And this picture is really just here to demonstrate that to all of you. So these are, on the left, you'll see images from ancient Egypt, or Kemet, as it was called. And as the proverb says, nothing's new under the sun. Black folks been Black folking since the beginning of time. Okay, so we've been swimming since the ancient times. As you can see at the top row, this brother with his 360 waves, but looking at this ancient carving that has the same hairstyle. And below that, you see this woman with a similarly ancient hairstyle that we see reproduced even today. So we've never stopped being ourselves. In fact, I would say much of what we practice as Black culture today is really just a rebirthing, because in the belief system of many Africans, we are our ancestors returned. So I think a lot of things come through ancestral memory, but we'll talk about that more later. All right, so overall, my goal is to demonstrate that Black hair is meaningful, right? It's more than just, again, individual style. It is deeply meaningful. This picture is of 3 different moments in time. You have another woman from ancient Egypt with a hairstyle that not only deals with hair, but also a whole headpiece that is deeply spiritually significant. Another woman from the turn of the 20th century in Ghana with a very unique hairstyle. And another third picture of a young African-American woman with a similarly high hairstyle. There's a reason for high hairstyles. A lot of people make fun of Black women for having these very kind of heightened hairstyles, but that is a deep tradition that honors the intelligence of a woman, and the discernment, the spiritual power of a woman. And so there's again ways that we continue to be ourselves even when we don't know that we're being ourselves. So I want to come back to the meaningfulness. Right? Black hair is cultural, spiritual, political, and it's critical to our health. The next thing I want to talk about tonight is that Black hair has been demonized. This is just a clip from a news brief, not in Orlando. It is from, I believe, the UK. This was covered by the BBC. This young woman was basically expelled from school for having her own natural hair. So we'll talk more about the ways in which Black hair has been demonized. And then we'll talk about shaming, hair shaming, and how Black hair shaming is a result of the history of demonizing Black hair, namely by white or Western society for our hair. And then also we internalize this shaming practice, and we shame each other over hair issues. So you have 2 Black women, or a girl and a woman, who have in more recent news been shamed for various hair issues. So we're going to talk about them more later. And I know the woman on the right has a great deal of current relevance. So we'll come back to that. And then finally, we're going to talk about Black hair positivity as a response to the shaming. How do we get over these challenges that we have with our hair internally and externally, with the internal Black community and also the external community. How do we solve that problem? Through various types of hair positivity. So we'll talk about that as well. All right, so the culture. First, I want to talk about the ways in which hair is identity. Hair is our identity. Hair tells you a lot about who we are. So hair and adornment has always been important to people of African descent, right? And I think that's really important for me to say. It seems like it should just be common sense, but it's not. My point really here is that I hope Black people can be unapologetic about their love for adorning themselves, their love for wearing gold, their love for adorning their teeth, adorning their necks, adorning their ears, adorning their hair, and wearing all kinds of creative hairstyles. A lot of people think that a Black woman with a PhD who is a college professor should not shave the side of her head like this. Some people think a Black woman who's a college professor shouldn't have natural hair at all. And I think that shame has become such a serious part of our relationship with our hair. And I think we need to let that go. But we have to learn who we are and value and appreciate our hair culture in order to do that, right? So I want us to be unapologetic about hair adornment and body adornment, because in our deep culture, in our culture before we got here, our body was considered a temple. Our body is considered sacred space. Just like any other sacred space you occupy your body first, and that is deep African wisdom. In fact, most people in the world, indigenous people in the world, believe that, not just Africans. The old culture of everybody was the body is the temple. So if you decorate your home, if you decorate your house of worship, you want it to look nice, you keep it clean, you do the same thing for your body. You're celebrating the divinity, the sacredness of this, the thing that sustains you on earth, the thing that gets you moving all around, that lets you do the things you want to do, that lets you express all the gifts you came here with. It's your body first, right? And so that adorning yourself and loving yourself is really a part of African culture. Also, self-love is a part of African culture. Confidence in oneself is a part of African culture. It wasn't until slavery and colonization that we learned low self-esteem and self-hatred in various forms. And so that's really, really important. So I love to see Black folks expressive with their hair. Hair is a language. Black hair is symbolic. Black hair ain't just nothing for nothing. It's not just about being cute. There are deep historical, cultural meanings, even if we forgot some of them. So tonight will be a reminder for some of us who have kind of forgotten over time, over generations, what we mean, what we're speaking when we're talking about our hair or talking through our hair. So one way to look at hair and culture is to look at the ways in which hairstyles can identify a person. So in traditional African societies, and I have to start with Africa because from my studies, it's really difficult to understand who a Black person is without understanding Africa. Like when we came over here on these ships, they didn't just mind erase us when we got off the ship and like we left all that stuff behind and just stopped being Africans or stopped being ourselves. In fact, one of the things that kept us sane was doing things that we did back home that were familiar to us and helped us feel like people, right? So a person's hairstyle was traditionally a way to tell you what their occupation was, if they were a warrior, a blacksmith, a priest, a carpenter, a healer, a medicine person. Hairstyle could teach you that about them. You could literally go into a village somewhere and read the community because the different hairstyles could tell you who did what. Their marital status. Single people's hair look different than married people's hair. Their age set, right? You come up and you in these traditional societies, you go through a rite of passage, you become an adult. You might start wearing a different hairstyle, or everybody in a certain age group will wear the same type of hairstyle. It tells you your seniority. There are some hairstyles you can't wear until you reach a certain age of eldership. It'll tell you merit or honorable status. Let's say you did something amazing for your community and they wanted to honor you. Now you have the right to wear this hairstyle or that hairstyle. It tells you someone who has received some sort of honor or even royalty status, obviously. It might tell you how many children a person has or whether or not they've had children yet. In many African societies, your age and your parental status are the two major determinants of where you are in that society. Elders are more highly ranked than younger people. And people who have had children who are parents are given much more responsibility and honor in the society. It also could tell you someone's emotional state. And this is really important, especially for Black people dealing with trauma. We'll talk about that a little more later. Typically, when people in African societies went through something traumatic or they had experienced a great loss, what do you think happened? It was a way of dealing with emotions, particularly negative emotions, to cut one's hair. So in my father's ethnic group, so my father, like I said, is from a very small ethnic group in Nigeria and Cameroon. And in his ethnic group, traditionally now, I don't think they still always do this, but they used to cut the hair off completely every 7 years. So my dad actually did that. He cut our hair off a couple of times. And then, you know, it's just hair. You start over again. But the notion was you cut off the hair so that you can purge and get rid of all of the negative energy, the negative experience, things that happened over the course of that 7 years, and start fresh. So there's lots of beliefs and traditions around hair. Sometimes warriors would grow their hair long, right? Samson wasn't the only one who had the strength and believed that strength lived in one's hair. You know, various Native American groups believed the same thing. But after those warriors would come home from battle, they would cut all their hair off if they had to take life, if they had to take a human life. It's a way of cleansing oneself spiritually of what you had to do, of of killing, right? So it's a deeply spiritual process, but definitely cultural first. We'll talk more about that. So this is an example. This is a Masai Omurani warrior. So people say Masai warriors all the time. They live in what is now Kenya, the Masai ethnic group. I reject the word tribe. I really discourage people from using tribe because tribe is a very colonial word that is meant to denigrate people and talk about them as if they're primitive and backwards. So I call them ethnic groups or nations. So the Masai ethnic group, they call their warrior tradition Olmurani. And the men in the Masai ethnic group grow their hair long. Meanwhile, the women tend to wear their hair very short and shaved close to the head. So it's like the opposite of how we are out here in the Western world. And so this young man, as you can see, you can zero in, he's got these tiny, tiny little twists. Usually a woman in his clan or his community, in his lineage, will coat his hair with the red clay. So you can see that on the right. This young man, he's a young warrior, and he's standing there talking to a young woman. So these photographs have so much of what we just talked about in them. We know, or if you knew the Masai culture, right, you could look at this picture and really decode it and be like, okay, I know they're in this age group. They're probably about 20 years old. They've been through their rites of passage. He's already done his warrior training, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a language. Black hairstyles speak, okay? That's really, really important to remember, because just like they speak in Kenya, this is one thing that really unites the Black world. Like, it's no matter where you go, we have these things in common. We have so many different things. I feel like through my studies, and just to tell you a little bit about my background. So I went to Howard University for my undergrad degree in speech pathology. And then I switched gears and I got a master's degree in African American studies from Columbia University, came back to Howard for my PhD in African diaspora history. So I now teach history, Black history. I teach Black global history, African American, Caribbean, really anything with Black people anywhere in the world, I'm probably teaching that class. And I run the African American Studies Institute. And in my studies, I realized we are much more alike than we are different in the world. If we really just look at the deep meaning of what we do, we just have to look a little deeper and we see there's so much we have in common. But I think people look at culture in a very superficial way. So I'm always like, push deeper and you'll see more. So I see a lot when I look at this picture. So that's just an example like of how hair can speak to and tell you a lot about our identities. So another thing I want you to kind of remember is the Black hair is deeply spiritual. And, you know, that's not something we have to like argue about. People don't usually push back on that. Like, Black folks know you don't just let any old body touch your hair, right? There's a reason for that. That deep trust you have to have for your hairstylist. That is so important in our community, because hair and your head in general is such a sacred part of your body, right? And so my little subtitle here is our hairstyles speak not only to our community, right, and tell you about people's status and their age, but also they indicate deep spiritual phenomena, right? Whether you believe it or not, Black hairstylists are some of the most important people in our community. Whether you agree about it or not, the head is a very important energy center on your body. Chicago folks know you got to wear hats because heat escapes through the top of your head. You got to cover it up. Our thick hair can be helpful in that, but it's sometimes it's not enough. But there's also a lot of energy that happens. So when someone's doing hair, that's a great deal of trust and energy transfer that happens. So like I told you, I did hair for a lot of years. I still do from time to time. And I started studying spirituality at that time when I was like young in college. And one of the things I started to notice, the more I started studying and really applying it to myself and studying myself and paying attention to myself and how it's feeling, is I could go in the hair salon one day and be feeling fine. And then a client will sit in my chair and they're just like feeling raggedy, they're upset, they're angry. And then all of a sudden I'm in a horrible mood and I feel depressed and I'm sad and I'm like, oh, I absorbed some things. I had to learn how to stop absorbing people's stuff. It's not to say I couldn't be a good listening ear, but it's that I had to learn how to not allow the energy to transfer that way, right? That's an important thing that your culture can help you with if you take the time to be aware, but we've lost that. So we've lost the ability to even understand what's happening with us. Or I was feeling upset and I was doing people's hair and they were getting all cranky and I was like, oh, why is she tripping? I gave them my stuff, right? So I had to learn how to manage my energy and calm myself down and be centered before I touch somebody else's head, right? So it's very important. And Black folks on some level still know this. It's not just can they get your hairstyle right? It's do you even want to spend that time with them, right? Because there's energy transfer that happens. In the Yoruba tradition, for instance, the Yoruba are people that you find in what is now Nigeria. They're all over the world. Yoruba, you know somebody who's Yoruba, I guarantee you. In that tradition, they call this part the Ori. And it is really like the seat of your consciousness, is the seat of your indwelling divinity. Some people call it intuition. It is the the God particle in you that guides you. That little voice in your head to tell you what's right or wrong, what really is telling you what aligns with your destiny and what isn't, what is for you and what ain't. We always go awry when we don't listen to that part, right? When we don't listen to that little voice, but it's believed that it's here, right? And so again, and you'll find this over and over and over again in all kinds of African traditions, if you go to Caribbean, it's the same stuff. If you go to the Deep South, it's the same stuff. It's a belief about hair. Even beliefs that we have about dropping hair on the ground, or when you cut someone's hair, you can't just let it just fall anywhere, right? You got to dispose of it properly. You got to protect it because what, right? Put it in the chat. Because you could scatter your thoughts, or someone could take the hair and use it on you. All of these things are not completely baseless. These are culturally based things. And now Western science is finally catching up to the understanding that hair contains our genetic material. So it really is your essence. It really is you in that hair. It is DNA in that hair. So it's almost like now the Western world has caught up to and given us a vocabulary to talk about things we've already known, right? So I could say much more about that, but I want to talk about the woman in this picture. So this is Marie Laveau. Some of you may have heard of her if you watched American Horror Story. I think it's season 3, Coven, when it's talking about the witches and stuff. Marie Laveau was a character on that season played by Angela Bassett, but she was a real historical person who lived, and she's a part of my research as the high Vodou priestess in Louisiana. And I love talking about Marie Laveau because what people typically don't know about her is she was a hairdresser. She really was. So Angela Bassett was a hairdresser on the show because Marie Laveau really was. So Marie Laveau was, by no mistake, the high priestess of Vodou and also a hairdresser. And Vodou, by the way, some people call it voodoo, right, is a religion. A lot of people are really afraid of it. And seen as like devilment and all this other stuff. But what people really don't understand is our African spiritual beliefs. Yes, we had religions, spiritual beliefs before we got here, before someone introduced us to Jesus, and that very new religion. We had very old ones that kept us going and kept us healthy and happy for a long, long time, a lot longer than that. And this Vodou was a continuation of those traditions. In fact, Vodou became such a threat and became something that we were taught to think of negatively because Vodou was such an important instrument in Black people fighting against slavery. It was really the pulling together of all of these different African religious practices into a new kind of religion that everybody could kind of unite under. All the most potent stuff we had, all the most powerful stuff we had, to help us fight with. And since we used it to fight and resist slavery, it became something that was thought of as evil. Well, someone taught us that was evil. So really think about that. In any case, Marie Laveau was the high priestess of Vodou, but was also, again, trusted because of her spiritual authority to do people's hair. So we'll come back to her later, but that's very political. What I want you to do is pay attention to how she looks in this photo. Well, it's not a photo, it's a painting. So this is probably like the 1850s. This is Marie Laveau. Perhaps this is Marie Laveau the first. She had also a daughter and a granddaughter, so there's a lot of debate about which one this is. But her head wrap is very significant. Her head wrap is very, very important. So really thinking about Black hair and even the things we put on our hair as very political, okay? So that's my next point. We'll see Marie again. Black hair is political, right? And this picture is of a Black protester. Obviously, he's holding up the Black fist. Obviously, he's got the quintessential Black afro. And that's what we think about when we think about the political nature of Black hair. And that matters, right? This is a hairstyle that harkens back to the Black is Beautiful movement, the Black Power movement, the Black arts movement. It is a hairstyle that is seen as resisting and being politically driven. It's long Black hair, right? It's not short and neat and acceptable to white society. And so it is political, but there are many other ways that Black hair has been political. And it raises these questions about assimilation, right? And this is not to pass judgment on any Black person who cuts their hair short or any Black person who straightens their hair. It is the reason why we do those things is a product of a history of being forced to assimilate. Covering up our African hair the way it grows out of our head, changing it to look more like the hair of our oppressors, to be more acceptable to them for a lot of reasons, because our hair is a part of resistance. But what it does is it doesn't just cover up your culture, it covers up your humanity. Not being allowed to wear your hair the way it grows out your scalp naturally, not being able to just get up in the morning and wear it like it looks, is about covering up your humanity. And that goes all the way back to chattel slavery. Finally, Black hair is key to Black health. Well, it's not finally. We got more to talk about. But our hair choices can enhance our health, or it can hinder our health, right? Our choices. So this is Nicole Ari Parker. She's a Black actress. She went natural. It was a big deal. She came up with this headband that can, help keep Black women's hairstyles, particularly their edges, from being, ruined or reverting back to curly when they sweat and work out. Because she tried to come up with a solution to help Black women to be able to work out. And I like this picture. I thought it was relevant because really the whole naturalista movement, the reason why 25% more Black women are going natural these days is really a question of health. It really is a question of health and not much else. I mean, it is a question of self-discovery and culture, but stripping it all down, it really is a question of health. Cultural health, but also physical health. We've already heard from many other media outlets that chemically straightening our hair can lead to fibroids in Black women, obviously to low self-esteem. There are studies by people like Patty O'Brien Richardson that have demonstrated that Black teenage girls exercise 40% less to preserve hairstyles. And those numbers, that 40% gets even higher when you're thinking about how many Black women choose not to exercise to protect hairstyles, right? So Black women are literally giving up health choices, health-seeking choices, and exercise less than they might otherwise do because they're protecting hairstyles. So there is a very important health dimension here. And as I alluded to, it includes mental health. It does. Self-esteem and loving your hair as it is matters. I'm not going to judge you for straightening your hair. We're all a product of our environment. But I really do think it is important to first love how your own natural hair looks. If you can't say that, then you're not ready to do the straightening thing. If you haven't engaged and gotten to know your own hair as it grows out of your head, there's still some work to do. That's all I'll say about that, right? But it's mental health. It's not to say you crazy if you straighten your hair. It is to say that to know yourself truly, to feel the texture of your own hair and to learn to appreciate that and understand it is a part of knowing who you are. And then, obviously, there's the psychological impact of pain. There's the psychological impact of being burned. And then there's also like the fact that getting your hair done is a form of self-care. Learning about yourself and taking time out to deal with your hair and spend time with your hair is self-care, which is good for your mental health, right? So the pictures I've offered you here, one on the left is from ancient Kemet or ancient Egypt, where these dignitaries, these very high status women are getting their hair done by a younger or a servant or I guess she's not a servant, maybe she is. She's just not as wealthy as they are. Maybe she's just a hairstylist, but she's putting these little, I don't know what you call those, like little, it's not a pile, but it's like a little piece of solid oil on the hair, and it will eventually melt into the scalp. So this is just a symbolic way of depicting that we have always used the oils and the butters on our hair, and that's a really important part of Black hair care. Moisture. On the right, you see a photograph from Maryland, probably in the 1890s, of a woman wrapping a young girl's hair outside a cabin. It was probably formerly a slave cabin, and for many of us after slavery, we lived in the same exact place we did during slavery in the same quarters. But they're taking out time. She's taking out time for this girl to do her hair. Women in West Africa used to do this wrapping with thread and string and twine and rope and things to stretch out the hair for braiding. And for YouTube University, you can see tons of videos where now even that practice has come back into our knowledge, where we wrap the hair to stretch it out so that we don't have to use heat to stretch the hair out. It's a healthier way of stretching the hair out so you can braid it more easily and detangle it and then stretch it and then braid it. So outside of even just the mechanics of doing hair with the oil and the stretching, this is really about these people asserting the fact that they're human and they deserve a break, right? They deserve a break. I highly recommend the NAP ministry, the NAP ministry. It is about Black women taking a nap and getting rest, because sometimes, because we have such a history of laboring for this country, these countries, for everyone in our families, we feel guilty almost when we take rest or we take time to care for ourselves. All right, so Black hair, a sin, a crime. That's really, really important. In the previous slide, we talked about the mental and emotional benefits, how hair can make you feel like a person. Getting your hair done and taking that time out to care for yourself, being touched by someone, whether it's lovingly or not, because some of us are tender-headed, whether that helps you, right? That's therapeutic. Smelling good oils, right? Having someone to listen to you, take care of you, be in safe space. That's important. But on the opposite end of that spectrum, we have the demonizing of Black hair, right? So in this picture, and I'm going to get a little closer. we have a treadmill. This is the original treadmill, and I have to show people this picture. Before it was a piece of exercise equipment. During slavery, it was a piece of torture equipment. So this is in Jamaica. So obviously it goes without saying that the United States was not the only place they had slavery. Black people were enslaved in all of the Americas, all of the American countries, from Canada all the way down to the bottom of South America. These were all originally European colonies that eventually became nations, but all of these nations were founded on the enslavement of African people. And so that's why they got Black people in the Caribbean and South America and Canada and all these other places in between, because we were brought to many different stops on the transatlantic trade. And this image defies a lot of misconceptions. One thing we think, we all just got beat down on the plantation, but sometimes they would outsource the beatings and the torture. And for a Black person or enslaved person who had gotten out of line, so to speak, they would take you sometimes to a house of correction where they would correct you, which is torture you basically until you submit again. What's interesting to note is that the white people in the picture, the white men kind of left of center, are just kind of watching, but all of the people doing the punishing are Black. That's important to note, that this is an important part of the system of slavery. To perpetuate it, they had to force us to commit acts of violence against each other. That's why I think in many ways the psychology of slavery is that Black people are mentally trained to do violence against each other. That's the only way the system continues to work. That's the only way they could maintain it, is to desensitize us to harming each other. And then at the bottom of the picture, the bottom center on the floor, I need you to kind of focus in on the detail. These Black people are cutting this woman's hair off. They're specifically cutting off her braids. Right, so you got the treadmill going in the background. Those people are being tortured by making the wheel go. I actually had a Jamaican student who had one of these in the back of his school and didn't know what it was coming up until he took my class. But down front is a story you might miss if you don't look closely. They're taking scissors and cutting her braids off. Now, this might be a specific form of torture that they sent her here for because she was being what they call prideful. Prideful is something like if you read old slave holders' journals and stuff, it was a crime to be prideful, like having too much pride in yourself, acting like a human, acting like you had rights, privileges, like that you could own yourself, that you didn't want to be raped tonight, that you wanted to move about, see your family, raise your own kids, not cook the meals, take a bath when you wanted to, rest when you needed to. That's called being prideful. And so this woman probably thought she was enjoying herself by braiding her hair. And a lot of time when you see images of slavery, they wear these rags on their heads because they actually wanted them to depersonalize them. Chattel slavery was about dehumanizing. That's what makes it different from any other form of slavery in history. Is the point was to make us feel like we're not humans, we are animals. So if you braid up your hair into some beautiful hairstyle, you're doing too much. You acting like a human. You're saying you have an identity, right? Going back to what we talked about at the beginning. You're saying you have a personality, that you have value, that you look good, you think you look good. So that's a part of her specific customized torture. So anyway, I could dwell on that for a long time. But also this is because it's deeper than we thought. Actually, I need to say this because people don't know how deep it is. I originally thought that it was just because we were Black. And by that logic, you could actually say kinky, curly hair is naturally bad, and maybe they just saw something bad about it. But it's super deep, guys. This is a soul deep problem we have. I thought I might skip this, but I'm not gonna skip it. During the 1700s and 1800s, in old newspapers that I've read, they literally talked about straight hair as Christian hair. That's how they would talk about it in the papers, Christian hair. So if your hair is not straight, you don't have Christian hair, what does that logic mean to you? It means if your hair is not Christian, it is devilish, literally. So I was like, what does that even mean? So I looked into it. And I discovered that in medieval Europe, depictions of Satan, of the devil, were of a black-skinned creature with curly hair. That's how they depicted the devil. And that has a lot to do with their being mad at the early African Moors. They're being mad at, at the Africans they encountered who were, you know, teaching them things that they didn't want to learn, like how to bathe themselves, have, you know, science and math and things. And you know, some of those Africans were Islamic, so there's that. The issue with the Christians and the Catholic Church. So for a lot of reasons, they vilified Africans. And so they started depicting the devil as a black-skinned creature with curly hair. And so literally they convinced themselves, and then eventually convinced us, that the devil lived in the curls of our hair. That a black person was naturally in league with Satan because they had curly hair. That was the sign of their covenant with the devil. How does this play out? Again, hair cutting. The fact that in the Americas, during the witch craze, right, it wasn't just them chasing down white women in Salem. They would hang the white women over here in the colonies, but they would burn the black women they accused of witchcraft, because the idea was, if you burn a black woman, since she's already in league with the devil, you had to burn her so her soul wouldn't come back. Like, so black women were the ones being burned at the stake. So it's so deep. Like, and to convince us that our hair was evil, at the end of the day, was an easy thing after that, after being tortured and tormented around your hair for hundreds of years, right? All right, so now we can move on. So not only was our hair seen as threatening because they made this false equivalence with the devil, but it was seen as a form of resistance because we used it to resist, right? We talked about Marie Laveau. The fact that they had these laws called Tignon laws in Louisiana in the 1780s is really significant. Tignon is like a French word for like a head wrap or a scarf. And they made every black woman wrap her hair up, a woman of color or a black woman. So there were mixed race people in between. Even they had to cover up their hair because they didn't want them enticing white men. And Marie Laveau had the nerve to say, okay, I got to cover up my hair, but it's going to still be fabulous. So they actually, black women got creative. So they would wear the most fabulous, colorful fabrics, madras fabrics, etc. They would make the head wraps super high and just complex. You can still see that because that's something we brought from Africa. Black women in Africa are still doing it, right? We're still doing it over here. It's getting a rebirth. But she had this painting with this head wrap because soon after they started realizing black women were getting just too creative about this head wrap thing. So then they outlawed wearing a head wrap with more than one color and beyond a certain height off your head. So that's why she was like, oh really? I'm gonna flex hard on you with this 2-color, very large head wrap. All right, so so that's it about Marie Laveau. There's so much more I can say about her. But even looking at a form of resistance in terms of economic resistance, this is Madam C.J. Walker. Many of you have heard of her as like the first black millionaire, but what she was directly challenging was black poverty. She was resisting poverty. So after slavery, she's still resisting poverty. She's resisting intersectional forms of oppression. By intersectional, I mean black women being oppressed for being black and being women, so kept out of certain levels of advancement in the workforce after slavery. Yeah, you could pick somebody's cotton after slavery. You could still be someone's washerwoman. You could still watch their babies and cook their food, but you couldn't make your own money. You couldn't be a business owner. This woman literally put tens of thousands of black women to work for themselves as independent operators in her factories, making products, selling them for them, right? This is just a small swath of the black women that she empowered financially. And so hair, and a lot of things people don't know about Madam C.J. Walker was she wasn't really focused on hair straightening. She was focused on hair growth because black women were losing hair. Why? Stress, overwork, and being and neglect, not having the time because they were working so hard to actually take care of their hair, having to wear that rag all day, basically. So this is another example that kind of loops us back to slavery of resistance. These are franca. These are just images from flags of war in Ghana. And the point I'm making is these black women have a similar hairstyle to a black woman you saw in an earlier slide in Ghana. These are queen mothers. And when the people in Ashanti land, which is now Ghana, were fighting against the British who tried to colonize them, they made these war flags. The warriors made these war flags, but you'll see women on these flags, not just any women, but women with a certain hairstyle. This woman has a high hairstyle to, again, indicate she's an intelligent woman. She's a strategist. She's a leader. She has the stool of war to let you know that she is a leader and she's leading them into battle. She has a machete. They even have guns. And also, just side note, the breasts being kind of sagging and slanted will also let you know that they're mothers, that they've suckled children. And that's important because, again, it gives them a higher status and a greater, deeper wisdom to lead this society into war. And we see the same hairstyle among enslaved women who were fighting back. In places like Jamaica, there's a guy named John Thistlewood who writes lots of stuff about Black women because he liked to rape them, and he would write about them in detail. I mean, he would track their menstrual cycles and STDs he was circulating amongst them and everything, but he noticed everything, like their hairstyles. And on the eve of a revolution, a revolt in Jamaica in 1760, he started to notice they started shaving their heads around the sides and wearing these red scarves and interesting things like that. He was like, what's going on? So he didn't know what was going on, but these people were preparing for war based on their cultural practices from back home. So there's so much more I could say about that. But white society has criminalized Black hair. Obviously, we know this takes place within schools, the workplace, public and private settings. We use terms in school policies and workplace policies like disruptive hairstyles, faddish hairstyles, unprofessional hairstyles, unkempt hairstyles, right? And we've seen, unfortunately, that we have Black children being expelled from school, given detention, banned from extracurricular activities like school dances for wearing braids, disqualified from sports like wrestling for wearing things like dreadlocks, etc. We've seen job discrimination, people in corporate America, etc., feeling like they can't wear their own natural hair to work. When we say professional, I mean, we do it to each other, right? When we say, oh, that's unprofessional, or that's not neat looking, that's not, what we're really sometimes saying is it doesn't look white enough. And we have to be really honest with each other about that, because that's problematic, because what we do is we contribute to internal oppression, and we let kind of the white norms and standards that they've imposed on us cause us to internally attack each other. And that just shouldn't be the case. So internal shaming. Finally, the last part, respectability politics, social media, race and gender and class. Obviously, Tessica Brown has been a subject of discussion all doggone week. This poor woman, I think we should look at this very carefully, right? A lot of people, just similar to Blue Ivy, like a lot of people are like, what the heck is going on here? She ought to blah, 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 blah. She don't deserve blah, blah, blah. She deserves blah, 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 blah. And I really always err on the side of, if it's a Black person, I'm going to give them all of my grace, the fullest measure of my patience, and the fullest measure of my empathy and compassion. Why? Because we don't get that from the broader society. It's our responsibility to give ourselves the benefit of the doubt and as much support as we need, but we're so mean to each other. It's just mean-spirited. And the same thing happened with Blue Ivy, and her being a child did not even protect her. Right? From people taking time out of their lives to be cruel, to harass. It's one thing if you don't think she was smart, okay, go about your life. But people took time out to go and cause harm and to try to hurt her feelings. And I think that that's really not okay, because we're no better than, our so-called oppressors when we do that. One issue with Blue Ivy, I'll come back to Tessica, is texturism. People were talking about her hair was it was too nappy, it was uncombed, right? With Tessica Brown here, people were saying, if she wasn't trying to get her hair so slick and straight, you know what I mean? She just hate herself. She should just go natural and just love herself. But it's like, on one end of the spectrum, we hate each other for being too nappy, and now there's this new group of folks that are hating each other for having straight hair, for straightening their hair. And none of it's really productive. I think you can critique. I think you can offer constructive criticism and guidance. I would love to see somebody offer Tessica like some self hair care educations, hair care classes, some counseling, something more therapeutic, right? Our traditions have been therapeutic. Our hairstyles are therapists, right? But this is really a form of misogynoir, like the extreme harassment, dehumanizing her, the fact that they're not even using her name in most spaces. They're calling her Gorilla Glue Girl. And that's dangerously close to actually calling a Black woman a gorilla. Like, I'm sorry, but we have a history of being compared to apes and primates, again, with trying to dehumanize us and compare us to animals. And I feel like Black people are participating way too much in something that is dangerously close to doing that with this woman. And she's a grown-up. Regardless of what you think about her judgment or her common sense, she's still a human who deserves dignity, and she's 40 years old. So she's not anybody's girl, right? It inferiorizes her to call a grown woman a girl, right? Regardless of what you think to herself, do you give other human beings their dignity, right? We criminalize her for making a big mistake. Meanwhile, we extend all kinds of patience and grace to other people who make mistakes, at least enough to hold ourselves back from harassing them online. There's some classism going on here too. Shaming the rich, like shaming Beyonce, you should know better, you should never let her hair look like that, can't you afford to comb her hair? That's a form of shaming. And then shaming the poor, like she should have been able to read the label. Well, what if she can't read the label? Illiteracy is an issue in our community because we are underserved by the public education system. People in Chicago definitely know being underserved by the public education system, you know, and and people can go through life in this society and get jobs and everything and still are functionally illiterate. So if she couldn't read it, does she deserve to be abused and victimized by people, right? Where is your grace? Where is your compassion, right? Judging her for wokeness, right? Well, she want to slick down her edges. Well, yeah, maybe she's not woke and she hasn't come into self-love of her natural hair yet. Does she deserve to be abused for that? I don't think so, right? So we have a lack of concern for her humanity, the fact that this hurts her and she's experiencing mental distress from this, and really just not looking at her and seeing a human, right? We just forget that there's a person on the other end who can read these things and is losing sleep at night and all these other things. So I believe she deserved everything she got. I'm just putting my opinion out there. I'm just so happy that an African doctor rescued her. A lot of people believe that people from the continent of Africa don't care about African Americans, that they're selfish, they come here to take up jobs and all these other things. And yeah, there is a concept of a model minority, but everywhere in the world, European people of European descent will oppress the Black people they have history with and hold up the Black people they don't have history with. And those Africans are somebody else's N-word in other parts of the world. So it's a colonial game. It's a racial game that people are being played against each other, and that's a problem, right? That is a big, big problem. This guy offered her free surgery and treated her excellently. He gave her excellent care. It doesn't matter what your educational Black background is. If you are smart or stupid, you deserve to be treated with dignity, right? And I'm sensitive to this because I'm also half Nigerian and half African American, right? And so this is really speaking to my life. So I love the way that this resolved itself. And that leads us to the question of Black positivity, hair positivity. This is a picture of my good friend, Dr. Afia, who has a research lab and an online social media presence called psychohairapy. She has training sessions where she trains hairstylists who are already like our unofficial therapists, trains them in therapeutic methods so they can offer more intentional therapy to their clients. You're already listening to them. They're already sharing all their life and their drama with you. How can we make that more therapeutic so you can be even more helpful as you're doing their hair? And also protect yourself emotionally and mentally while doing it. That's what she's all about. And she's creating lots of really important spaces. And she's doing this internationally. She's been to the UK, Cuba, because a lot of folks in other parts of the world haven't even really started having these conversations about loving their hair, right? And so there's more solutions. One, we have to re-educate ourselves about our hair and get to know it and know how to do it. Most of us just wear our hair straight because it's easy, because we just don't even know how to do natural hair, because it seems difficult, because we have to relearn ourselves, right? We don't know where Black beauty supply stores are, right? I recommend 4th Avenue Market. It's online. It's an online Black-owned beauty supply store. But there's so many ways to be positive about Black hair and share resources about Black hair. There's films and TV shows we can watch now. Hair Love, which is a very short and very beautiful cartoon animation about loving the hair of a Black girl. Bad Hair, which is kind of a scary movie, but really has an important message about Black hair and also deep ties to Black culture and folklore. We have social media sites, like looking for positive social media sites about Black hair of all textures. A lot of people, you know, they like natural hair, but only if it's a wavy and curly. We have to deal with that, right? We have to learn how to appreciate all hair textures. There are people who are trying to pass legislation to support Black people who are being discriminated against in school and the workplace. For instance, the Crown Act. When we say the Crown Act, it stands for creating a respectful and open world for natural hair. There is legislation in New York, California, and I think at least 22 other states are working on policy. Dr. Afia from the previous slide has testified in various states, including Maryland, before state legislatures to petition to get the act passed to prevent people from discriminating against you for wearing your own doggone hair as a Black person. It's a shame we have to do that and actually pass laws for that, but we do because we have to correct hundreds of years of this, right? And then finally, just learning, again, therapeutic and cultural methods like psychohairapy, but just getting together and educating each other to like relearn and relove our hair. This is my favorite African proverb. A bird sitting on a tree is never afraid of the branch breaking because her faith is not in the branch, but in her own wings. That's all I ever want for people of African descent, is to trust themselves, trust their culture, trust their ancestors and all the things that made things work for us before and have worked for us. A lot of these old wisdom things can work again. And we just got to believe in each other and give each other all of the compassion, all of our faith, all of our chances, all of our second chances to get this right. Because there's a lot working against us and we definitely can't be a part of working against each other. And that's it. This is an Ashanti princess, and then they had so much gold in that society that they literally would wear gold dust. Like, it's just adorn yourself, be happy about it. So thank everybody. Thank you. All right, so now I'm gonna stop this share screen and take questions. Okay, so Black men's hatred, historical hatred, disconnection from their hair as well. Some men get weekly haircuts because any growth and they feel nappy or raggedy. Yeah, and you're glad that more Gen Z men. Thank you, Angsa, for that question. That's my sister. That's my twin sister, by the way. But thank you. That's a really important issue. I definitely hope that in my presentation, I know I focus a lot on Black women, and we tend to focus on Black women when we talk about hair, but Black men are definitely implicated in this. Black men have very important hair traditions, not just the warrior tradition, but Black men have very important hair traditions, which is why I wanted to include at least one brother with, you know, the Masai Warrior, another brother with the Afro. Growing it out in the 60s and 70s was a form of resistance to that. And I think Black men, just like beauty salons, are very important sacred spaces for Black people because ain't nobody else got hair like us. So that's where we can be alone together and really deal with our stuff. Barbershops are the same way for Black men. They have sacred spaces. And I hope that we can use those spaces as therapeutic spaces for Black men to really uplift each other, heal each other, and then spaces where Black men and women get together. Obviously, Black men do Black women's hair and Black women do Black men's hair. So I think this is a conversation that really implicates everybody. The ways in which mechanisms of institutionalized racism has been used by the state to police and penalize Black people for their hair. Right. And that really is important. Like for hairstylists, I can't tell you how many challenges we've had in terms of licensure and having to perform and demonstrate the validity of our expertise to the state just to get licensure. And it's really, again, a part of that larger system of demonizing and criminalizing Black hair care culture. They even want Black hair care expertise to fit into a Western European mold. And obviously there's many stylists on the call tonight who can verify that and speak more to that. I never tried to get licensed. I just kind of stayed off the radar with doing hair and just kept it where it's always been, which is in our homes and in our private spaces. But for people for whom this is a major business, I know this is really a serious legal challenge. And I would dare say that it would be important in the Crown Act and maybe in other legislation to make sure that that is an item that is very important and very is highlighted in the struggle. Like we want legislation that protects Black braiders and hairstylers and makes it easier and more culturally, we want cultural competency and cultural fairness as it relates to licensure. talk about the origin or history of cornrows. Black women in Africa were the first to use them. Were they ever part of resistance against colonialism and slavery? Good question, William. Yes. Cornrows, a lot of people think that that is just racist for us to say cornrows or cane rows because it harkens back to slavery. I don't see that as racist or anything. In fact, the triple strand braiding of cornrows and even just plaits is deep. Like there's Ron Eglash has even written about the idea of African fractals. That braiding pattern and many other African traditional design patterns are directly mathematically correlated to the patterns used for like fractal lasers. Like it's deep wisdom. People don't even understand. And then on a physiological level, Black women used their hair to hide things, to braid maps and information into their hair. You know, 3 braids might mean something, right? Or hiding grains of rice or pumpkin seeds in their hair. Queen Nanny in Jamaica of the Maroon Society, which is a fugitive society of Africans who ran away from slavery and built their own societies and defended them so nobody was getting taken back into slavery. She led a society of people in Jamaica, and she was said to have kept pumpkin seeds in her hair, and then she multiplied the pumpkins and fed the people when they were starving. Black women enslaved in Suriname kept grains of rice in their hair to feed people because when they were being sold and moved around and dislocated, they didn't know where they were going. So like me and mine, we got to eat. So Black women have had weapons and razors in their hair. I mean, yeah, definitely Black hair is seen as threatening because of that history. So many women put her down and downgrade her intelligence. And Black women have put down your hair more than a white person. How do you respond to another Black woman who criticizes your Black hair? Thank you, Michaela, or Michaela. I mean, the same way. I would try to respond as compassionately as possible. If someone's obviously trying to offend you and attack you verbally, obviously you have every right to defend yourself however you see fit. But I would just say with as much compassion and love as you can muster, like, I love myself. I believe that the way I've done my hair is affirming for me, is beautiful. And just really just kind of like find a way to not let her words matter and just say, I wish you the same. Like, I wish you the same. I wish you can get to the place I am and how I my hair. I wish you could feel what I'm feeling right now. You know, that's kind of how I respond. The psychohairapy extend to cosmetology school and barbershops. Yes, I believe Dr. Fia does have plans to do this and extend this to cosmetology schools and barbershops. Absolutely. Yeah, the pandemic has interrupted a lot of things. But she's definitely tied together hair care and mental health, and will only be expanding because she's really got a huge platform now. She was on, I think, Good Morning America like a month or so ago. So hopefully she'll be getting much more shine because what she's doing is amazing work. And whenever, if you follow me on social media, I definitely will try to cross-link a lot of her stuff as well. Is that it? Do we have more questions? I think I got through all of them.